I never thought the click of a bank app could change how I saw my family. I was standing alone in my kitchen, the evening light soft on the walls, when I saw the number. My savings were smaller, much smaller. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. I sat down, held my phone, and listened to the fridge hum. My stepmother's voice came to mind, gentle, always polite. I remembered how she smiled at dinner, how she asked about my plans. My chest felt tight, not with anger, but with sadness. I wondered when trust became something fragile. I thought about all the years I worked, the nights I skipped rest, the hope I saved in that account. I did not cry, I just breathed, and a thought formed. If she crossed a line with my life savings, I would answer in my own way, that night. Before all of this, my life was quiet and steady. I lived alone in a small house that always smelled like coffee in the morning. I worked a simple job, saved what I could, and tried to stay out of trouble. My father used to say, "Slow and steady keeps the heart calm." I believed him. I never wanted much, just peace, safety, and a little comfort. My stepmother came into my life after my mother passed away. I was already grown, already shaped by my own losses. She was polite from the start, careful with her words. She never tried to replace my mother, and for that, I was thankful. We spoke softly to each other, like two people walking on thin ice. Over time, the ice felt stronger. Family dinners were simple. We sat at the same table, ate warm food, and talked about small things. Weather, work, neighbors. Sometimes she would look at me and ask, "Are you saving for something special?" I would smile and nod. I trusted her enough to answer honestly. My savings were my safety net. Years of careful choices. I kept the account simple, no risks, no secrets. When my father became ill, I helped where I could. My stepmother handled many things, and I was grateful. I thought we were working together, quietly, like family should. At least, that's what I believed back then. After my father passed, the house felt different, quieter. The walls held more silence than sound. My stepmother stayed in the family home, and I visited when I could. We shared tea in the kitchen, the same kitchen where my father used to sit and read the paper. She would sigh sometimes and say, "Change is hard." I always agreed. She asked for help with paperwork, forms, bills, small details. I wanted to help. Saying no felt cold. I thought trust was something you proved by being available. One afternoon, she said softly, "It's all so confusing. You're better with these things." I sat beside her, reading documents, explaining numbers. It felt harmless. Over time, she knew more about my life than I realized. Where I worked, how long I planned to work, that I saved carefully. I never felt watched. I felt included. That mattered to me. I remember one quiet evening when she said, almost to herself, "Families should look out for each other." I nodded. I believed that was true. I believed she meant it the same way I did. Looking back, there were pauses I ignored, questions that lingered too long. But at the time, nothing felt wrong. Everything felt calm, normal, safe. That is how trust usually grows, slowly, quietly, until one day you realize it has roots deeper than you expected. The changes did not come all at once. They arrived quietly, like dust settling on furniture you stop noticing. My stepmother began calling more often. Nothing urgent, just questions, small ones. "Do you still use the same bank?" she asked one afternoon. I answered without thinking. It felt normal. We were family. Sometimes she sounded tired. "Things are expensive now," she said once, stirring her tea. I nodded. Everything was expensive. I did not hear a warning in her voice. I heard worry, and worry makes people softer, not suspicious. She talked about the house more. Repairs, taxes, a leaking pipe that would not stop dripping. "Your father would have known what to do," she said, looking down. I felt that familiar pull in my chest, the need to help, the need to be useful. I offered advice, then small help. I reviewed the numbers. I explained my interest. I showed her how I tracked my savings. She watched closely. Too closely, maybe, but at the time, it felt like trust being shared, not taken. There were moments that stayed with me. Once, she paused and asked, "You're very careful with money, aren't you?" I laughed softly. "I have to be," I said. "That's all I have." She smiled, but her eyes stayed still. I started noticing small comments. "You're lucky," she said once. "Not everyone has savings." The word lucky felt heavy. I brushed it away. At night, I sometimes replayed conversations in my head. Nothing sounded wrong. Still, a quiet unease sat with me. I told myself it was grief. Change does that to people. Trust does not break loudly. It bends slowly. And at that time, I was still bending with it. The changes did not come all at once. They arrived quietly, like dust settling on furniture you stop noticing. My stepmother began calling more often. Nothing urgent, just questions, small ones. "Do you still use the same bank?" she asked one afternoon. I answered without thinking. It felt normal. We were family. Sometimes she sounded tired. "Things are expensive now," she said once, stirring her tea. I nodded. Everything was expensive. I did not hear a warning in her voice. I heard worry, and worry makes people softer, not suspicious. She talked about the house more. Repairs, taxes, a leaking pipe that would not stop dripping. "Your father would have known what to do," she said, looking down. I felt that familiar pull in my chest, the need to help, the need to be useful. I offered advice, then small help. I reviewed the numbers. I explained my interest. I showed her how I tracked my savings. She watched closely. Too closely, maybe, but at the time, it felt like trust being shared, not taken. There were moments that stayed with me. Once, she paused and asked, "You're very careful with money, aren't you?" I laughed softly. "I have to be," I said. "That's all I have." She smiled, but her eyes stayed still. I started noticing small comments. "You're lucky," she said once. "Not everyone has savings." The word lucky felt heavy. I brushed it away. At night, I sometimes replayed conversations in my head. Nothing sounded wrong. Still, a quiet unease sat with me. I told myself it was grief. Change does that to people. Trust does not break loudly. It bends slowly. And at that time, I was still bending with it. The changes did not come all at once. They arrived quietly, like dust settling on furniture you stop noticing. My stepmother began calling more often. Nothing urgent, just questions, small ones. "Do you still use the same bank?" she asked one afternoon. I answered without thinking. It felt normal. We were family. Sometimes she sounded tired. "Things are expensive now," she said once, stirring her tea. I nodded. Everything was expensive. I did not hear a warning in her voice. I heard worry, and worry makes people softer, not suspicious. She talked about the house more. Repairs, taxes, a leaking pipe that would not stop dripping. "Your father would have known what to do," she said, looking down. I felt that familiar pull in my chest, the need to help, the need to be useful. I offered advice, then small help. I reviewed the numbers. I explained my interest. I showed her how I tracked my savings. She watched closely. Too closely, maybe, but at the time, it felt like trust being shared, not taken. There were moments that stayed with me. Once, she paused and asked, "You're very careful with money, aren't you?" I laughed softly. "I have to be," I said. "That's all I have." She smiled, but her eyes stayed still. I started noticing small comments. "You're lucky," she said once. "Not everyone has savings." The word lucky felt heavy. I brushed it away. At night, I sometimes replayed conversations in my head. Nothing sounded wrong. Still, a quiet unease sat with me. I told myself it was grief. Change does that to people. Trust does not break loudly. It bends slowly. And at that time, I was still bending with it. The changes did not come all at once. They arrived quietly, like dust settling on furniture you stop noticing. My stepmother began calling more often. Nothing urgent, just questions, small ones. "Do you still use the same bank?" she asked one afternoon. I answered without thinking. It felt normal. We were family. Sometimes she sounded tired. "Things are expensive now," she said once, stirring her tea. I nodded. Everything was expensive. I did not hear a warning in her voice. I heard worry, and worry makes people softer, not suspicious. She talked about the house more. Repairs, taxes, a leaking pipe that would not stop dripping. "Your father would have known." That was when I began to plan. I did not confront her right away. I needed time to understand what I felt. It was not anger, it was grief. Grief for the trust I had given so freely. Grief for the version of family I believed in. Each morning, I moved through my routine slowly, like I was learning how to live in my own life again. One afternoon, I visited the bank in person. I sat across from a young clerk who spoke gently, as if she could sense my weight. She showed me the records. Clear, legal, authorized. My name was there every time. I thanked her and walked out into the sunlight feeling older than before. On the drive home, I remembered my stepmother's words. "Family helps family." I repeated them out loud. They sounded different now. Not warm, not kind, just useful. When I arrived home, I opened an old box of documents, letters, receipts, notes from my father. One envelope held his handwriting, uneven but familiar. He had written, "Take care of yourself. Don't let anyone take what you worked for." My eyes filled, but I did not cry. That night, I made a decision. Not to shout, not to accuse, not to beg for explanations that would not heal me. I would protect myself. Quietly, completely. I changed my passwords. I locked my accounts. I drew clear lines where none had existed before. With each step, my breathing felt easier. Control returned, not as power, but as peace. I knew she would notice. I knew questions would come, but something inside me had settled. I did not need her words anymore. The turning point was not the money. It was the moment I chose myself without guilt, without apology. That choice felt heavy, but it also felt right. She called 2 days later. Her voice was soft, almost playful. "I was trying to check something, but the account didn't open," she said. I held the phone gently, like it might break. "I made some changes," I replied. My voice surprised me. It was steady. There was a pause, long enough to hear her breathing. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Not angry, curious, careful. I looked out the window at the quiet street before answering. "Because it's mine," I said simply. She sighed. "I thought we trusted each other." Her words pressed against my chest. I swallowed. "Trust doesn't mean permission," I said. Silence followed, thick and heavy. When I visited her after that call, the house felt different. Still beautiful, still warm, but the air carried something unsaid. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she used to pour tea for both of us. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally, eyes down. I studied her face. She looked tired, smaller. "But you didn't ask," I replied. My words were calm, not sharp. "You decided for me." She nodded slowly. "I thought you wouldn't mind," she whispered. That sentence settled between us like a final truth. Not cruel, just honest. I realized then that her world and mine were not the same. What felt unthinkable to me felt reasonable to her. That understanding hurt more than the loss itself. I stood up to leave. At the door, she said softly, "What happens now?" I paused. Now, I let go, I answered, and I meant it. In the days that followed, I thought often about fairness, about justice, about what people expect when lines are crossed. I knew I could fight. I knew I could demand it, but those paths felt loud and empty. Instead, I chose something quieter, something that spoke in a language she would understand. She invited me to her housewarming. The renovations were complete. The place looked new, almost unfamiliar. I arrived with the wrapped box in my hands, light, simple. My heart was calm. At the table, she smiled nervously. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said. I returned the smile. "I wanted to," I replied. When she opened the gift, her hands slowed. Inside was a framed document, a clear statement. The total amount taken, dates, transfers, a simple note beneath it. This is what trust costs when it's spent without asking. Her face was drained of color. She looked up at me, confused. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "A housewarming gift, so nothing is hidden anymore." No voices were raised, no scene was made. The room stayed calm, but something shifted between us. The truth stood in the open, impossible to ignore. I did not stay long after that. As I walked to my car, the evening air felt cool and clean. I felt no victory, only relief. The turning point was complete, not because she understood me, but because I understood myself. I had answered betrayal without becoming bitter. I had closed a chapter with clarity instead of noise, and that mattered more than anything I had lost. After that evening, my life became quieter. Not empty, just still. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. The money was gone, yes, but the noise inside me had faded. That felt like a strange kind of balance. I focused on small routines. Morning light through the window, warm tea in my hands, cleaning the kitchen slowly, one plate at a time. These things grounded me. They reminded me that I was still here, still capable, still whole. My stepmother did not call for a while. I expected anger. I expected blame. None came. The silence felt heavy at first, then neutral. I realized silence can be a boundary, too. When I thought of her, I no longer felt shocked. I felt understanding. Not approval, understanding. She acted from fear, not care. That did not excuse her choice, but it explained it. An explanation helped me let go. I adjusted my plans. I recalculated my future carefully, honestly. It meant working longer. It meant fewer comforts. But it also meant independence. I was not starting over. I was continuing, just on a different path. One afternoon, I found myself smiling for no clear reason. That surprised me. I had expected to carry this loss like a stone forever. Instead, it was becoming lighter. Not because it mattered less, but because I mattered more. I wrote my stepmother a short letter. Not to accuse, not to demand, just to say I hoped she would be well. I did not mention money. I mentioned peace. Writing it felt like closing a door gently instead of slamming it. The resolution did not arrive as a relief. It arrived as acceptance. And acceptance felt like strength returning, slowly, quietly, in my own time. Weeks passed, then months. Life continued, as it always does. The world did not stop for my hurt, and I learned to move with it instead of against it. That was a lesson I did not expect to learn this way. I ran into my stepmother once at the grocery store. We stood near the fruit section, both holding baskets, both unsure. She looked older, tired. When our eyes met, she nodded. I nodded. No words were exchanged, and none were needed. I realized then that forgiveness does not always mean closeness. Sometimes it means distance without bitterness. I had forgiven her enough to breathe again. That was enough. At home, I removed old photos from frames and replaced them with new ones. A sunrise, a quiet street, a plant is growing near my window. These images reflected who I was becoming. someone more careful with trust, but not closed. I spoke with friends about boundaries for the first time. No complaints, just truths. I didn't protect myself, I said once. Saying it out loud felt honest, not shameful. Mistakes lose power when they are acknowledged. I also forgave myself. That took longer. I blamed my kindness, my openness. But kindness was never the problem. Silence was. I promised myself to speak sooner next time. Some evenings I still thought about the house. The new walls, the warmth she wanted so badly. I hoped it gave her comfort, not because she deserved it, but because bitterness would only follow me back home. The resolution, I learned, is not about winning. It is about choosing peace when chaos is available. And choosing peace takes courage most people never see. I was proud of myself, quietly, without needing anyone else to know. As the year turned, I felt something settle inside me. Not happiness, something steadier, confidence. I trusted myself again, not blindly, carefully, with eyes open. I rebuilt my savings slowly. Each deposit felt like a promise kept, not to money, but to my future. I tracked every step, not out of fear, but as a respect for my own effort. I stopped seeing myself as someone who had been taken from. I saw myself as someone who had learned. Learning lasts longer than loss. Sometimes, late at night, I imagined telling my father what happened. I imagined his quiet nod, his understanding silent. That thought comforted. When people now ask me about family, I answer carefully. Family is not just blood, I say. It's behavior. That truth feels earned. I no longer fear being kind. I fear being quiet when something feels wrong. That change alone was worth the pain. The resolution did not tie everything neatly. Some threads remain loose, but life is not a finished story. It is a living one, and I am still writing mine with intention. I wake each morning knowing I protected myself without becoming cold. I stood firm without raising my voice. I chose clarity over comfort. And that choice continues to guide me forward, one calm step at a time. I often think about how quiet strength looks. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It simply stays. After everything, I learned that protecting myself did not make me cruel. It made me honest. Honest about what I need and what I will no longer allow. When I look back now, I do not see a story about money. I see a story about trust, about how easily we hand pieces of ourselves to people we believe in. I also see how important it is to take those pieces back when something feels wrong. I still believe in family. I just believe differently. I believe families should feel safe, not confused, supportive, not draining. If that safety is missing, it is okay to step back without hate. Some nights, rain taps against my window, and I remember that kitchen, that silence, that moment of knowing. I no longer feel pain there. I feel clarity. Clarity has its own warmth. If you are listening to this and carrying a quiet hurt, I want you to know something. You are allowed to protect what you worked for, your time, your savings, your heart. Setting boundaries is not a punishment. It is an act of care. I did not lose myself in this story. I found myself, and that is something no one can ever take from me. This lesson stays with me, guiding my steps forward with patience, kindness, and a steady sense of self that grows quietly every day. As I close this chapter, I hold no wish to change the past. It taught me something valuable. People will show you who they are, often softly, often without words. Listening matters. Life continues in small moments, shared smiles, calm mornings, simple meals at a quiet table. These moments remind me that peace is built slowly through choices we make each day. If there is one thing I hope you carry from my story, it is this. Pay attention to what feels heavy in your chest. That feeling is information. Treat it gently, but take it seriously. You do not need to explain your boundaries to everyone. You do not need to be loud to be strong. Sometimes strength is a closed door, a calm goodbye, or a decision made in silence. I am still kind. I am still open. I am just wiser now. I know that trust should be earned, not assumed, and care should never cost your safety. Wherever you are, I hope you choose yourself with compassion, not once, but again and again. That choice creates a life that feels steady, warm, and truly your own. May you find the courage to honor your limits, the patience to heal quietly, and the hope that tomorrow can still feel gentle and safe. Stories like mine end not with bitterness, but with understanding, growth, and a calm heart ready to begin again. That is the ending I wish for you, wherever life has placed you today, with grace. If this story touched something inside you, you're not alone. Many of us carry quiet moments like this, moments we rarely speak about. If you've ever had to protect your heart, your trust, or your future, this space is for you. Take a moment to pause. Breathe. And if you feel ready, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone tonight. If you want to hear more real-life stories about family, boundaries, healing, and quiet strength, consider subscribing to the channel. New stories are shared gently, with care, and always from the heart. And if someone you love might need this story, you can share it with them. Sometimes a soft voice and an honest story are enough to remind us that we're allowed to choose ourselves. Thank you for listening. Your time, your presence, and your empathy matter more than you know.